obviously we're all concerned about what's happening in Egypt, and we've been monitoring it very closely. Our commitment to Egypt has never been around any particular individual or party. Our commitment has been to a process. And when I took a position that it was time for Egypt to transition, it was based on the fact that Egypt had not had democratic government for decades, if ever. And that's what the people were calling for. They went through an election process that, by all accounts, were legitimate. And Mr. Morsi was elected. And the U.S. government's attitude has been we would deal with a democratically elected government. What we've also said is that democracy is not just about elections. It's also about how are you working with an opposition? How do you treat dissenting voices? How do you treat minority groups? And what is clear right now is that although Mr. Morsi was elected democratically, there's more work to be done to create the conditions in which everybody feels that their voices are heard and that the government is responsive and truly representative. And so what we've encouraged the government to do is to reach out to the opposition and work through these issues in a political process. It's not the U.S.'s job to determine what that process is, but what we have said is go through processes that are legitimate and observe rule of law. Now, obviously, we've been watching these big protests. Our number one priority has been making sure that our embassies and consulates are protected. Number two, what we've consistently insisted on is that all parties involved, whether it's members of Mr. Morsi's party or the opposition, that they remain peaceful. And although we have not seen the kind of violence that many had feared so far, the potential remains there, and everybody has to show restraint. I should add, by the way, we have seen many reports of women being assaulted in these protests, and for those who are participating in these protests or marches, assaulting women does not qualify as peaceful protests. So we're going to continue to work with all parties inside of Egypt to try to channel this through legal, legitimate processes. But I do think that if the situation is going to resolve itself for the benefit of Egypt over the long term, then all the parties there have to step back from maximalist positions. Democracies don't work when everybody says it's the other person's fault and I want 100% of what I want. And you know, the good thing about the United States and other mature democracies is you work through processes that force compromise, and those get institutionalized. But look, you know, we've had 200+ years of practice at it. This is still new in Egypt, and so they're going to have to work through these things. The key is making sure that they don't work through them in a violent fashion. But our position's always been, it's not our job to choose who Egypt's leaders are. We do want to make sure that all the voices are heard, and it's done in a peaceful way.